Welcome to the Italian Wine Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Vinitaly International Wine and Spirits Exhibition. The 54th edition of Vinitaly will be held from the 10th to the 13th of April, right here in Verona. To discover more about Vinitaly and get your tickets, visit vinitaly.com. This year, the Italian Wine Podcast will be live and in person in Pavilion 6, Stand A7. So come on down and say hello.
Welcome to our special SOS Everybody Needs a Bit of Scienza installment. This is a shout out to all the wine geeks out there. We need some feedback on the Professore's new book, the English version of Jumbo Shrimp Guide to the Origins, Evolution, and Future of the Grapevine. The Italian Wine Podcast is part of the Mama Jumbo Shrimp brand, and Mama Jumbo Shrimp is all about breaking down difficult concepts into small, bite-sized pieces. The issue here is that the new book is, well, a bit difficult to chew at this point, so we want to invite wine lovers out there to give us their input and advice to make the final product more reader-friendly. So have at it, wine lovers. Don't be shy. Send your comments to info@italianwinepodcast.com. Now on to the show. Hello again, Richard.
Hi, how are you? Seems like we're together every day, Joy.
I know. So welcome, people, to SOS Special Edition. Everybody Needs a Bit of Scienza. This is minus Professore Scienza. He's not here. This is actually Richard narrating Professore Scienza's new book that he has translated into English. And of course, we are doing this because I'm stepping in for Stevie, who usually does this, but essentially the idea...
I'm stepping in for the professor, so...
I know. Oh dear, we're in trouble. I'm not saying that for you. I'm saying, yeah.
No,
okay.
I'm a cheap imitation.
Oh,
a pound shop.
As am I. So let's see what we can do here. Yeah, we are doing this because we would like listeners to listen in, and if they have any comments, ideas, opinions, anything that can help us to essentially keep working on this book in English to make it more palatable for the everyday reader. I've said this in every episode that I've done. This was intended for the Jumbo Shrimp Guide series, which takes complex concepts and makes them simple so that everybody can enjoy the information. So that is what we're doing here today. Go ahead and tell us what chapter you're reading, and then take it away.
Okay, well, this is from chapter 13, which is called Challenging the Myth of Purity. And basically this chapter is about crossbreeding, and in particular the stigma associated with altering the natural state of the grape. So it also explores the quasi-mythological status of wine and how that shapes our attitudes towards it. So again, because it's Scienza, it's a chapter that's rich with references to history, to alchemy, to the esoteric movement, and even Mein Kampf for good measure, I'm afraid. So yeah, the question, I guess, as you explained for our listeners, is whether these references, these historical references, detract from the core message of the book, or whether they're actually a useful and interesting part of the narrative. So this is chapter 13, Challenging the Myth of Purity. Purity has a religious significance. Crossbreeding different species with the European vine means contaminating the natural state of the grape, contaminating both those who produce that wine and those who consume it. It means disrupting the link between classical tradition and modernity. Through the purity of the wine obtained from the European vine, the esoteric movement aimed to restore that link between religion and wine, and in so doing, restore nature to its superior state, reawakening an air of mystique. The search for varietal purity in a wine evokes the same principles as those of natural and organic viticulture, through the ideological rejection of modern oenological techniques, which are regarded as akin to an alchemical workshop. On the 19th of April 1937, the first fascist racial protection law was enacted in Italy, to preserve the Italian race from impurity of blood. In the language of eugenics, nation, race and state were frequently interchangeable terms. Hitler stated in Mein Kampf, "The mixing of the superior and the inferior races is clearly against the intent of nature and implies the extinction of the superior Aryan race. Whenever Aryan blood has been mixed with that of inferior people, the result was to eliminate those who are bearers of culture." Wine is a symbolic object capable of conveying abstract cultural values. It is also endowed with a symbolic efficacy, capable of producing predictable and repeated responses, such as pleasure, deviance, elegance, and refinement. For this reason, it is considered an emblematic, mythological drink with social value in relation to communication. It conveys values that are not far from those of the ideal man, of beauty, health, and intelligence, those very characteristics that eugenicists wanted to preserve from racial contamination. Why are we not scandalized when we eat an apple, another mythological object in Western culture that was the result of a spontaneous crossing? The first American vine to reach European soil was the Isabella or strawberry grape, a natural cross between Vitis labrusca and Vitis vinifera, which appeared in France around 1820. Italian legislation relating to the cultivation of hybrids was the most severe in the world. The laws prohibiting the sale of wine produced from species other than Vitis vinifera date back to 1931, a prohibition reaffirmed in Article 22 of the Presidential Decree No. 162 of the 12th of February 1965, which prohibited the vinification of grapes other than Vitis vinifera. Currently, with regard to the use of hybrids in the production of wine, European Union Regulation 1308/2013 is in force, which establishes common rules for all member states. However, the different ways of registering vine varieties in national registers opens up a regulatory vacuum which, in fact, creates a gap for the discretion of individual members. Article 93 of the above-mentioned regulation allows the production of wine made from hybrids, but only for common wines or wines with a geographical indication. Regarding the classification of vine varieties, Regulation No. 2389/89 provided that wine grape varieties could be classified as recommended, authorised, or temporarily authorised, depending on whether, respectively, they were currently cultivated in the community and belonged to the Vitis vinifera species or came from interspecific hybrids whose aptitude for cultivation was recognised as satisfactory, and which normally resulted in wines of good quality. As regards classification, Article 81 established that member states may classify as wine grape varieties only those belonging to the Vitis vinifera species or coming from a cross between Vitis vinifera species and other species of the Vitis genus, and excludes, for example, Noah, Othello, Isabella, Jacques, Clinton, and Herbemont, and all those obtained from Vitis labrusca. From the combined provisions of the two articles, it is clear that hybrids can be classified as wine grape varieties, but only for common wines or with geographical indication. The prohibition to classify the 6 varieties expressly listed by Article 81 remains in force. The problem of the nomenclature of the name used to indicate the new grape variety, and in particular the association with the name of a noble grape variety of indisputed qualitative fame, is considerable. There are 2 main trains of thought in this regard. First, allowing the presence in the name of the noble parent, risking confusing the consumer or prohibiting it, preventing the producer from boasting the noble lineage of the cultivated vine. And secondly, the consumer's understanding, at least in part, of the origin of the product consumed. Both arguments have pros and cons. There is also a resolution of the International Organization of Vine and Wine which states, "For new varieties, it is necessary to avoid the use of names that may lead to possible confusion with the name of other existing varieties, especially when these are already used in officially approved labels of existing commercial products. Artaban, Floreal, Vidocq, and Voltis are the first 4 French grape varieties resistant to fungal diseases developed by the French National Research Institute for Agriculture, Food and Environment that have been recognised by the Community Plant Variety Office. They are, therefore, officially part of the traditional European varieties and can be cultivated to produce DOC wines, thus overcoming the European legislation which recognises only the vines of the European species Vitis vinifera for the production of denomination wines. In particular, the Valtis variety was permitted in the production of champagne due to the characteristics of its wine, which is not very aromatic. Initially, only up to 5% of the production area of each farm was authorised, and it couldn't exceed 10% in a blend. For the new techniques of genetic improvement, Directive 2001/18 EC of the European Parliament and of the Council regulates the deliberate release into the environment of genetically modified organisms. Organisms obtained with techniques involving the use of genetic engineering must comply with the provisions of the directive itself, including also the genome editing technique, in which the genetic mutation takes place by applying new plant breeding techniques that allow the modification in a precise way of specific DNA sequence of the plant without altering its natural position.
Okay. That touched on some touchy subjects there. I did note.
Yeah, I mean, reading it back, it's evident that there's a lot of information, a lot of maybe too much information. Maybe we just need to in the written format anyway. There's some explanatory notes and there's some footnotes. So yeah, that seems for me as well just to kind of jump from one topic to another without always explicitly emphasising why or what the argument is.
When you read his writing to translate it, do you feel like, is this, something that is always done by, somebody who is a professor such as him, or is it also a cultural thing in terms of the Italian, how Italians, they love to explain and furnish a lot of their, of course, it's the language of amore.
Yeah.
But do you think that comes out here in the writing?
This is a very controversial area, and I don't want to get into trouble by saying one thing or another, but I think there's no doubt that Italian writing has a particular flow and a particular style and a particular tone, and so trying to adjust that for an international audience, and also even just the simple act of translating that into English. Of course, what sounds fantastic in Italian doesn't always sound right in English. So that's the challenge.
I always find that in English you can say something like quite concisely, one sentence, but then once you put it into Italian, it ends up being so much longer, 2 or 3 sentences.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm wondering here.
Yeah, I think so, and I think there's also, speaking for myself again, that I was always taught and always encouraged to write in short, simple, clear sentences, whereas in Italian, the opposite is true.
Right.
And I had a conversation on this topic quite recently with someone, and they explained to me, like, if you write in Italian 12 words per sentence, you sound like a caveman.
Right.
So the Italian style of writing is really just about... But there's a rhythm to it as well, and there's a flow, and if that's what you're used to, then that's fine.
Now you are translating it into English, so...
There's some really, really important points to be made here, and some important arguments. It's just whether we're doing it in the right way and in the way that has the clearest and most effective impact. That's
right.
Probably the question, I suppose, for our audience here. And for me as well, reading these chapters out, having spent the last couple of weeks and months translating, this process of reading it out is actually quite useful, because it's the first time really I get a sense of
how it's going.
And it's one thing to be looking at it at a screen and looking at individual words and translating individual sections, but then when you have to read out the whole thing and say, well, how is an audience going to respond to that? That's quite a useful process, because it really does clarify your mind a little bit, I think, and I'm beginning to realise what needs to be changed and what needs to be retained.
Well, on that note, if any listeners have any ideas or any thoughts, or want to just comment.
Yeah, even a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Whatever, yeah. Just contact us through our social media handles. You can find those in the description notes below. And
my email, if you want to contact me directly, is Hough, which is HOUGH @justdothework.it.
Okay. So with that, it is a wrap. And I think that's
lunchtime.
It's lunchtime. Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Italian Wine Podcast, brought to you by Vinitaly International Wine and Spirits Exhibition, the biggest drinks trade fair in the world. For more information about Vinitaly and tickets, visit vinitaly.com, and remember to subscribe to Italian Wine Podcast and catch us on SoundCloud, Spotify, and wherever you get your pods. You can also find us at italianwinepodcast.com.
Hi guys, I'm Joy Livingston and I am the producer of the Italian Wine Podcast. Thank you for listening. We are the only wine podcast that has been doing a daily show since the pandemic began. This is a labor of love and we are committed to bringing you free content every day. Of course, this takes time and effort, not to mention the cost of equipment, production, and editing. We would be grateful for your donations, suggestions, requests, and ideas. For more information on how to get in touch, go to italianwinepodcast.com.